have a resolution at the end of the meeting, and we will discuss the plans for 2026. Diplomatic bodies of Russia and Belarus will discuss international cooperation and also exchange opinions on the current issues around the world. On the 27th of November, Sergei Lavrov is planning to take part in the ministry at the Council of the foreign ministers, and also ministers of defense in Bishkek. Before the meeting of the Council for Collective Defense, Collective Security, the Russian party will inform the partners on its participation in 2026. It's expected that during the meeting, certain documents on ensuring security in the bloc will be discussed, and the heads of states will discuss the security issues. This is not an exhaustive list of all the events. Some of the events are being agreed and being developed, and of course, we will, of course, update our schedule on the website of Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and also on the portal of our ministry, and also in our social media. Kiev neo-Nazis continue to attack civil infrastructure, and 71 citizens of Russian Federation suffered from strikes of Ukrainian drones, and 58 injured, and a child under 14 died. Until 14th of November, in Yasnaya Zona and Volcha Alexandrovna in Oktyabrskaya, 2 civilians died, 9 people were injured. On the 19th of November, near Nikolskaya and Novonazhanka, 3 civilians were injured. On the 16th of November, in Borisovka and Novostroyevka, 3 people were injured from the attacks of the drone. In Volgograd region, as a result of attack of Ukrainian drones, in the night of 16th of November, 3 citizens suffered injuries. 8 Ukrainian drones attacked Novovoronezhsky nuclear plant. All of them were shot down, but some parts caused some damage, and that led to a reduction in output by 50%. In Voronezh region, 4 American ATACMS rockets were launched, and they were all shot down, but the parts of the rocket fell on civilian infrastructure. In Alexander Kalinova, the military of the Ukrainian military attacked local Orthodox Church priests, and Ukrainian Nazis methodologically were killing unarmed civilians and were causing more and more injuries. As a result, 7 people, including the priest, died. Banderites were not satisfied with this. They were not allowing local people to get together and bury the bodies, and they were trying to prevent their attempts to bury the bodies. So this bloody safari of the Ukrainian banderites is part of life today, and Kiev continues its desire to exterminate citizens of eastern Ukraine. citizen of Itskovka, told media that a shot was aimed at her after she said hello to the Banderites in Russian, and this is why they wanted to kill her. The bullet of this Banderite flew just past her head. In Novovladimirovka, Chuvakovka, 2 people were injured, and on the 17th of November in Dobroseliye, a local resident suffered injuries, and in Alyoshki, a local citizen died or was killed by a drone. Russian courts continue to pass sentences to Ukrainian military. Roman Petrovsky received 17 years in prison. Sharutin received 15 years in prison, 14 years. Colombian mercenaries and Japan were sentenced to 14 years in prison in absentia, and some of them were put on the international wanted list. This was the foundation on which Western powers, Anglo-Saxon powers especially, established a bloody infrastructure to kill all these people. Tomorrow, or in a few days' time, there will be an anniversary of so-called Euromaidan, and it is lucky that at the time it was called Euromaidan at the time. They wanted to put a different meaning into this word, but today we understand what the actual meaning of that name was. They removed the legitimate power. They prepared provocateurs and under propaganda slogans. All these slogans about better European life, about fighting corruption, and they brought the crowds onto the streets. They were allocated a role of participants of riots, street riots, and this was sponsored. This bloody coup was sponsored by Western powers, and this coup was rejected by other parts of the country, but in Kiev it took place. And the question today is, what did Euromaidan give to Ukrainian people today? Have they achieved their dream of European integration, of a self-sufficient, industrially developed, from a well-populated former Republic of the Soviet Union, they turned into an impoverished country, and a country which is used to promote interests of Western policies. They're laundering money using this country, and what is surprising is that after this laundry, the money is then drenched in blood. They discriminate people on the basis of their ethnicity, on the basis of language. There's a dictator in the country. Totalitarian repressive machine of the state is now operating in Ukraine. They're suppressing any alternative opinions. They paid a high price for for what they called at the time European choice. You know where they were deceived. Ukraine has always been Europe. It's a part of European continent. It's a European part of the Eurasian space. This is Europe in literature, in culture, in tradition. But at the time they were told, no, that you were not Europe, you were never Europe. But you could invest and you can become Europe. And this is what they invested. They invested the lives of so many people. And now we can discuss what is happening in Ukraine right now. Let's call it what it is. It's the consequence of Euromaidan. This is not corruption scandals. It's not just a corruption story. This is the consequence of destruction of statehood of Ukraine through external manipulation, through supply of weapons and money without any accountability. There are some horrible details that are coming to light of this corruption scandal, as they call it. These are real mafia-type cliques. These are bloody machinations on people's lives. Judging from information leaks, the thieves on Bankova, they were laundering the money, appropriating the money from their Western sponsors. And that gives us a lot of food for thought. Laundering huge amounts of money. They were producing drones at an inflated price, and most of these drones are being destroyed by Russian defense. And also the money directed supposedly at reconstruction of the damaged infrastructure. In fact, this money is being redirected to their private accounts. And they're trying to justify themselves. But even here, they are trying to blame everything on the Kremlin. But real Ukrainians do not believe these tales. They should have known this earlier, but it's better to know this late than never. Majority of respondents believe that the level of corruption in Ukraine increased. And this is over the 4 years of the war. 19%, 62% support the resignation of Yermak. And this was the measuring of popular opinion before the current events. And the opinion will become even more negative against the Kiev regime. The so-called case of Mindic has led to collapse of Zelensky's rating. His rating of approval does not exceed 20%, but I believe that this is exactly the figure where Zelensky will be ahead of his Western curators. The Western party of the war continues to pump the money into Zelensky regime, and Scandinavian countries are pledging $500 million, and they list priority needs of Ukraine. As NATO says that the first priority of Ukraine is not medicine, is not humanitarian help, it's not education, not economic growth. No. What can kill as many people as possible? what can finish them off. And this is what the money from NATO is covering. Germany confirmed their intent to spend money on a new package of 500 million. They pledged another 150 million. It is obvious that there is lack of desire among the Western leaders to recognize the failure of the Ukraine project. They were never worried about Ukrainians themselves. On the 14th of November, Kaja Kallas, in her press conference with the heads of Poland, France, Italy, and so on, she thanked Germany for their readiness to support Kiev regime up to a level of 11 billion euro. And that, she says, creates a great example for the rest of Europe. Example of what, may I ask you? Just now, the first deputy minister of foreign affairs just announced that they exited all the peace processes, and at the same time, Kaja Kallas states that Russians have announced their desire to stop participating in any peace process. When did we say this? Who said this? She said she also discussed the frozen Russian assets, and she said that this is a great transaction compared to the price of victory of Russia. And a woman in politics, especially when she has children, understands the weight of her words. Of course, she has to relate everything she says to her own experience of motherhood and apply all of what she's saying to the practical life of her children. Again, Kaja Kallas says that it is a very beneficial transaction compared to the victory of Russia in this war. So another Russophobe, Rasmussen, Andrius Kubilius, on the 17th of November at the security conference in Vilnius, he said that we need to place combat-ready forces from Ukraine on the border with Russia in Lithuania, and this would counter the threat of Russian attack on Europe. And again, let me say this. So after establishing peace, it is suggested that parties are taking upon themselves of not conducting any military activity. And he's saying that as soon as they agree this, Ukrainian army would move to another part of a European continent. And then it's just waiting for the spark to happen. On the 17th of November, together with Macron, a 10-year agreement was signed to provide, for the French to provide 100 Rafale aircraft and Sam-T anti-aircraft defense to Ukraine. Zelensky said that this is a historic document, and I think that he is right partially. because this will just remain in history, because it is even difficult to call it a transaction. It's just an intent, letter of intent. They're talking about 20 billion euro, and Kiev regime does not have this money. So this is virtual, interesting transaction. One party does not have the money, the other party does not have the goods. Somehow they agreed on something in the future. And this understanding, with the French understanding that everything that will be supplied, if anything is ever supplied, will be destroyed by the Russian Federation as something that could threaten Russian Federation. On the 18th of November, Zelensky went to Spain, met with Pedro Sabil, and they talked about the package of military assistance on 16 billion euro. 300 million will be spent on providing defense equipment. Also, Spain agreed to provide 200 million on supporting security measures in Europe, aimed at supporting defense industry, which would provide goods to military goods to Ukraine. Zelensky's sponsors are requiring total mobilization in Ukraine, and they want to lower the mobilization age in order to replenish the losses of Ukrainian military. They are planning to use refugees from Ukraine. And for this reason, European countries are scaling down their programs for support of refugees from Ukraine. So they are looking at these people as cannon fodder. So they have given them some shelter, they have fed them, and now they put them under the knife. So they don't want them as their citizens, they don't want them as refugees who are temporary on their territory. They want them as just material, as cannon fodder. And let's see what's happening in Ukrainian military. Among Ukrainian military, there's demoralization. There is disappointment. And there is a report from the city of Izum, where a member of Azov battalion talked about demotivating influence of mass fleeing of soldiers from the front lines. So it's this Azov battalion, which is banned in Russia. And he called on Norway and other European countries. He called on them to bring all these people back home. In order for these refugees to come back to Ukraine, he's saying that otherwise, why are we fighting if these people are fleeing abroad? So that is a good question for the citizens of Ukraine. Who are you fighting for, and what are you fighting for? So that Zelensky stuffs his pockets and pockets of his relatives. Of course, in order to use Ukraine as a tool to fight Russia, but of course, if we talk about what is happening on the territory of Ukraine, all of this is aimed at only one thing. This purpose is to stuff the pockets of the people who are tools in the hands of the Western powers. They are instruments of geopolitical games, and there are no other reasons. And for this, people are being sent by the rulers on Bankovaya to the front line, only for this purpose. I don't know if that person who gave that interview has a soul, but that cry of his soul is not surprising. According to the statistics, desertions have increased by 44, by a factor of 44, from 3,022 to 160,000 in 2025. So this is the rate of desertion from Ukrainian military. This is how citizens of Ukraine flee the front lines. On the 15th of November, a member of Defense Council in his interview said that in the context of deficit of people, personnel in Ukrainian military, there will be another army of deserters with whom we'll have to take into account. About 26,000 Ukrainians. Just think about it. Out of 26,500 Ukrainians, over 21,000 people become deserters. Again, these are figures for one specific person, but this person is a member of the Defense Committee of Verkhovная Rada of Ukraine. So this information comes from a person who knows what he's talking about, who has facts in one way or another. Also, Verkhovная Rada discusses strengthening the measures for mobilization in Ukraine. Also, they want to reduce the recruitment age to 23 and maybe straight away to 18. They want to review these terms, and this will make the situation even worse. And this will speed up the exit of those who potentially could be recruited. So we have goals of demilitarization and denazification of Ukraine, and these goals will be achieved by the Russian government. In United Nations, there's a project for the rights of people who are located on the temporarily occupied areas like Crimea and eastern Ukraine. They are attempting to strengthen their position in terms of the illegitimate claims on these territories. However, there was a vote against this project, and there were 14 other countries who voted against this initiative. It is indicative that the project of this resolution was not supported by more than 90 states. So, in essence, the authors of this resolution were basing their position on obvious lies, and they are trying to repeat arguments and blame against Russian Federation. Let's look at some examples. clear example of this unfairness is the concern that was formulated. Systemic violation, as they say, of the Russian Federation, of the rights of Crimean Tatars in Crimea. Has anybody spoken to them? These people claim this, but they are not living on that territory. They don't live on that territory. Have they spoken to anyone among those people? Of course they haven't. And they began their resolution on the basis of this. This document includes the call on Russia to provide education in Ukrainian and in Tatar language and stop blocking the education in Ukrainian language, which they claim is the discrimination. At the same time, they are not seeing any problem with de-Russification of Ukrainian state, where there is no place for Russians. It all depends on the mood of the president of Ukraine. And also back in 2018, the government of Ukraine took the course of eradicating and persecuting Ukrainian Orthodox Church, including using violence against churchgoers and priests. They take property, they use violence, and on the 31st of January 2024, there was a claim against Russian Federation from Ukraine on the basis of the International Court of United Nations. And the claim is based on the claim is about the terrorist activity, and the United Nations agreed that it's got no basis. And other claims of Ukrainian government look as absurd as this one. Elimination of any media that supports that goes against the opinions of Ukrainian government is what is happening in Ukraine at the moment. You remember, like, one of the negotiators came back to Ukraine as part of Ukrainian delegation. He was shot. Why was he shot? Because he was against the position of the other party within the Ukrainian negotiating team. They're using torture against Russian prisoners of war, and of course violation of human rights have become part of the daily practice. This quickly degrading situation with this protection of human rights became possible with the support of Western powers, and the spiral of violence continues to develop. From our side, we'd like to emphasize that Russia sticks to its obligations in the field of protecting human rights and protecting its people in DNR, LNR, Crimea, Sevastopol. And Russian law protects people in these areas and ensures protection of their rights in healthcare and education, equal rights on all the territories that rejoined Russian Federation. The lives of people are guaranteed by human protection agreements, and there's no difference with any other areas of Russia. In terms of languages, for the first time, when we talk about the latest history, such package of opportunities for learning their languages, for using their languages, for creating media in their languages, were received by citizens of Crimea. And these were guaranteed by Russia. They are fixed in law, recorded in law, and they are applied actively. This week, on the invitation of Assembly of the World, Chilean writer Patricio Maribel visited Moscow. On the 19th of November, there was a meeting with public chamber members, and they discussed different questions, and they placed flowers to the monument of heroes of the World War II. Also, Patricia brought a rose. This is a rose, or these roses are made from the fragments of shells that were used to shell people in Donetsk and eastern Ukraine. The author talks about the suffering of civilians and children in eastern Ukraine. This is an attempt to show, there's a term, international term, human dimension of this military conflict. So this is sorrow and suffering of people. This emphasizes the criminal nature of the actions of the Kiev regime against citizens and terrorist activity of Azov battalion. The writer also took part in certain discussion forums, and he called upon people to talk about this and to counteract the propaganda by American media on these issues. And of course, we're grateful to Patricio for his activity in spreading the right information in Latin America, despite all these attempts to do the opposite from media. Again, countries, Ukraine is trying to use Moldova is trying to use the European integration as pretext to break all the linkage and connection with historical connection with Russia. In Chisinau, there's a Russian Center of Science and Culture. So what is the excuse for them to attack this center? Moldovan powers are saying that Russia is using this center in order to promote a distorted narrative. This is the formulation they are using. Moldovan members of parliament are saying that there was no evaluation of what that center is actually doing. So they're just using that prefabricated formula or ready formula in order to attack the center. They accused, I don't know how to express this, they are blaming Pushkin, Alexander Pushkin, our great Russian poet, they're saying that Bessarabia, Pushkin visited Bessarabia in the 19th century, and this is where it all began, the attack on sexual minorities. And so that we're saying that this Russophobia is leading to loss of common sense. This is absurd. And where are they stating this? They are saying it in the parliament of the country, in Moldova. Dear citizens of Moldova, those members of parliament were elected in order for them to represent interests of citizens, so that they create laws in the interests of their country. No, they're blaming Pushkin for everything. This is just nonsense. So when we looked at that Russian comedy where Pushkin was blamed for everything, we thought that this was just a joke, and we thought this was absurd, but actually turned out to be a script for other states. And Moldova is trying to clean its ranks, trying to clear their country of anyone who is calling for re-establishing relationships or strengthening relationships with Russia. Maybe they'll bring back Pushkin to put him on trial. So there's integration into North Atlantic security blocks. This is the reason. This is the real reason. They don't want to admit to their own people that they're dragging their country into a crisis. They're receiving grants. They are ensuring future only for one part of the elite in Moldova, and they want to maybe do the same as Ukraine, feed the rest of the country to the conflict. They have conducted Shield of Peace military exercises 2025, and they are talking about international peacekeeping missions. What are the international peacekeeping missions of NATO? This is a question we want to ask. Citizens of Moldova are asking Sandu, what are the peacekeeping missions of NATO? Are there, so that Moldova could join those peacekeeping missions? Shall we recall them? In Libya, there were some peacekeeping achievements that has led to a situation where UN cannot piece it back together. And I'm not even talking about the tragedy that Libya citizens living through. Hundreds and tens of thousands of refugees fled from Libya across the sea to Europe. Maybe we could remember some other peacekeeping missions, maybe bombardment of Yugoslavia, where the symbol became the symbol of hope, which Sandu is using as another highlight. Sandu has got different people. These are Romanians. I'm not even going to mention Iraq or Afghanistan. NATO does not have any, as they say here, peacekeeping missions which have led to any peacekeeping results. They only have destruction missions. Moldova is receiving 66 units of military transport. Moldova is the second after Ukraine in receiving peacekeeping, so-called peacekeeping funds from EU. in fact, their funds to support war. So the support of military of Moldova has reached 137 million euro, and that's with the background of economic collapse in Moldova. Over the 5 years of solidarity rule, the cost of living has lived by 66%. The growth of Moldova is 0.4%, which is effectively 0% growth. 4.2 slump in industrial output in Moldova, and possibly here Pushkin is also to be blamed. Alexander Sergeyevich, somebody who once visited Bessarabia. Incompetency and helplessness of Moldova government becomes obvious more and more. And the next year's tranche of $100 million was blocked from the IMF, and that's to do with the delay in fiscal reform, as they say. And here Moldova had to take a loan from France. We, of course, know that France has got everything protected, even things being stolen from Louvre. We can see this short-sighted policy hits the budget of Moldova, and they cannot survive without external influences, external infusions of money. And they see, people see that the regime in Moldova is helpless, and they are moving away from the country. They're voting with their feet. As you know, on the 19th of November, Poland has revoked the application to continue functioning in Gdansk. So all employees of diplomatic mission in Gdansk have to leave Gdansk before the 23rd of December. And this was done in Krakow, and we see that this is another step to destroy the bilateral relationships with Poland, and there's rampant Russophobia in Poland, and that is another blow to diplomatic presence in the country. Situation between Cambodia and Thailand, and we are concerned due to recent tensions on the border. We are hoping that the two countries will resume their cooperation, and remember that there was an agreement signed on the 26th of October, and we hope that only peaceful means will be used in order to resolve any conflicts, and we understand that this is a consequence of colonial policy of the West. We see that it is especially important to act in the spirit of unity and solidarity in order to overcome historic contradictions. In Djibouti, there were Days of Russian Culture conducted. It's a state program to promote Russian language and culture, Russian cinema, and so on. And with the support of the Russian embassy, there was a number of events that were conducted in order to promote the culture of the Russian Federation. And from the 15th to 17th of November, in Djibouti Conference Hall, representatives of Russian National Choir sang, and also there were some master classes in Russian language and also showcasing of Russian cinema. Ministers of Culture and Science visited Djibouti, and a number of international organizations, and also our citizens, students and school children visited the event, and they praised the professionalism of Russian artists and Russian performers, and this was also highlighted in the local media. Successful Russian Cultural Days demonstrate again that Russian culture is very much in demand on the African continent, and we will continue cooperating and conducting these events. Starting from September of the current year, in Mali, there's a fuel crisis, and this was provoked by the systematic attacks of the guerrilla Al-Qaeda groups, and so they're attacking transport convoys which provide fuel from Senegal or Cote d'Ivoire, and so there's the government is not able to resolve the lack or deficit of petrol, and this is a transition government of Mali. Ministry of Defense Corps are taking some actions in order to normalize the supply of fuel. They are supporting and convoying, they're supporting the convoys of fuel, and we see that the fuel crisis is reducing now, is abating in Mali, and Russia will continue to support the friendly nation of Mali in order to ensure stability in the country. Today, this has been discussed a lot, but in our country we pay special attention to this. On the 20th of November, it's 80-year anniversary of the Nuremberg trial. This was an unprecedented international trial that prosecuted all the criminals, military criminals, and they have condemned Nazism and their structures and organizations, and this sentence cannot be appealed, and this is the basis for international legal infrastructure. The statutes of the tribunal, the sentences have become the cornerstone of international law, and our country was at the basis of this. And it was the Soviet Union was the first one that formulated the procedure of a court case over international criminals, and it does not have any statutes of limitation. And we have seen over a number of years ruthless attempts to forget the lessons of Nuremberg and to throw doubt at the actions of the Soviet Union, and on that basis they're literally growing neo-Nazi movements. For example, in the countries where Red Army saved from complete obliteration by the Nazis, these countries have been saved by the Soviet Union, and for this there were some memorials placed in those countries, but they are now being destroyed, and now there are marches of the former members of SS, and now the modern fans of these forces, and we can see this in Baltic countries, in Ukraine, and Ministry of the Russian Federation has called upon tirelessly against forgetting the lessons of Nuremberg. And on the occasion of the 80th anniversary, and in Manege Exhibition Hall, we have an international scientific forum, historic forum devoted to this, and Sergei Lavrov published his address to the participants of the forum, and tomorrow there will be a themed session on diplomatic influence of Nuremberg trials and how it formed the current structures. I would like to say that literally that's why the current briefing was delayed, because just now in Manesh there was a session where I took part, and this was devoted to the information support of the Nuremberg trial. This is a very extensive exhibition, and they have recreated the hall where Nuremberg trial took place, with flags of the countries of anti-Hitler coalition that were delivering justice on behalf of people of the world. And there are some benches where criminals were sitting, where stenographers were taking notes, with witnesses and with speeches by people who studied this. The scientists, the researchers who come and speak, and children of those who participated in this tribunal. And they talk about their parents' experience. And I'm confident that this two-day conference, the materials of this conference, will become a part of that interactive project that is available online and would be available to a widest audience. And we hope that this would pay respect to the memory of people who brought justice to and punished the Nazi regime. In St. Petersburg, we've got a municipal forum of BRICS countries. We have a partnership network of Global South, and we talk about joint projects on the municipal level. Moscow Declaration of the BRICS Summit 2025 and Kazan BRICS Summit 2024. The forum will bring together about 5,000 participants, 700 speakers from different cities, experts, business representatives. There are 10 themes in this event. We'll talk about AI, digital transformation, neural networks, education, logistics, cultural exchange, tourism, and there'll be separate attention paid to investment projects. And we hope that this discussion will talk about increasing quality of life and municipal services, and also deepening humanitarian contacts. As a result of these events, we will talk about partnerships, new partnerships, establishing and strengthening connections, and ensuring balanced development. Another event that took place, I would like to highlight it, in Laos, in a province in Laos. There's there's an anti-mine initiative which is aimed at clearing up of the territory of Laos and Indochina from the munition that is unexploded in these areas from the aggression of U.S. aggression in the 60s. U.S. aviation has done over 500 missions, combat missions over Laos. They dropped 3 million tons of bombs and cassette bombs. About 30% of these bombs are unexploded, and they pose a continuous threat to local citizens in these regions. Since 2018, Russian anti-mine and Laos anti-mine forces have discovered 906 bombs and artillery shells. We've got 64 anti-mine experts from the Russian Federation who are working together with local experts, and these efforts will allow local people to come back to their normal activities. And Russian mine specialists are conducting this activity with the risk to their own lives. They will continue this humanitarian mission to help the friendly country of Laos in order to continue that cooperation. On the 12th of November in Rome, there's there is an international event organized by the Fund of Support of Spiritual Music close to Vatican, and this was done together with the Ministry of Culture, and we are continuing establishing and strengthening our cultural ties with Vatican. And the diplomatic representatives from different countries took place in this event. Synodal choir in Vatican is considered to be like historic, has got a historic meaning, and in the context of hybrid war against our country, we need to highlight the importance of participation of the Russian choir in this event. This event became extraordinary because it demonstrated that there's no basis in attempts to break the cultural connections, and we thank the participants of this event. And I'm happy to answer your questions. Do we have International Life here? How would you comment the publication that
Вы знаете, это буквально какая-то ежедневная рутина, когда любое публичное выступление российского дипломата в странах так называемых
Montenegro, there's claims that a public statement by a Russian state official, and they are saying that this is an attempt to intervene into the affairs of the country, and that the only way of avoiding these blames is not to allow Russian officials to speak at all. It seems that these anti-Russian narratives are, that are promoted by Anglo-Saxons, destroying what remains of common sense in the officials of these countries. So they distort facts, they remove the legitimate access of their citizens to information. When Lavrov spoke to Karel de la Sera, when he conveyed a very important arguments which were very important to the Italian public, these arguments are constantly distorted. He supported his facts with a special note, and he believed that this would be useful for the Italian people, and they cut it out of the interview. The Russian representative is the source, in fact, which they want to silence in the West. And this is a very dangerous approach for themselves. So living in this simulation, living in this world of fakes and simulations is dangerous to those who are inside the simulation. But apart from all of this persecution of diplomatic staff that goes against the Human Rights Resolution of 1948 and other Vienna Conventions, diplomatic Vienna Conventions. Diplomat has the right to convey the position of his country to the wider audience in that country without interfering the local affairs, without violating the local laws and traditions. However, they do want to convey the information about the state, the steps of their own country on the international arena, especially if it concerns the bilateral relations. If they disagree with something, then they have to deal with it through dialogue and through argument, and not by taking it out of context and removing texts from internet and creating some stories why that happened, and constant abuse in relation to those who speak. Another question, if you allow me. In Armenia, you know why they're doing this? We also have the situations where in the Russian segment, Russian-speaking or where there's a Russian license, we see interviews of foreign politicians or diplomats or ministers of foreign affairs, where we also have some concerns. There's some concerns to do with what they're saying. What do we do in this case? We publish a statement that argues with this. We do this in a civilized way, the way it is done in a civilized country. What do the countries do? What do those countries that taught us how to be free do in their turn? They use all these tricks and dishonesty. Recently, the powers of Armenia, without explaining why, refused Dmitry Seleznov, who is a military correspondent, to enter the country, who was talking about Karabakh conflict. You remember how Armenian government came to power on the platform of free speech and pluralism of opinion. See where they came to. Yes, the refusal of entry to the country. And what concerns us is that there is, when there is statutes of limitation, it is very clear that Dmitry Seleznov was reporting about Karabakh conflicts in the 20s. It's clear that he did this, but what he did wrong is not clear. And so we are hoping that the decision of the government of Armenia is not related to his journalistic activity. We're hoping that they are a democratic state, and freedom of speech is a symbol of true democracy, as we know. Thank you very much. Liana Dalu. Moving on. Anna Dalu is here with us. We have a question. As we know, Kiev said that they are discussing to renew the process of prisoners exchange with participation of Turkey and Arab Emirates. Can we say that that the direct negotiation process becomes indirect, and that there will not be any direct negotiations between Russia and Ukraine. I can tell you that this is not correct. None of what you listed means this. Russia had both direct negotiations and also we had exchange of prisoners of war with intermediary efforts of intermediaries. You can see on our website we thanked the countries that took part, if this was agreed with them, if this was verified with them. We always were grateful to the countries that acted as intermediaries, so please don't make these conclusions. Another thing I wanted to emphasize is all contacts in terms of exchanging prisoners of war or civilians. This was done through special bodies and ministries of foreign affairs provided some support, but the main role is played by specific bodies that are created for this. But if there are some agreements that are being reached, and if we provide diplomatic support to this, then of course we use this opportunity. Another question, if you allow me. Prime Minister of Israel, Netanyahu, visited occupied territories in Syria, occupied by the Israeli forces. How is Moscow evaluating this visit from the point of view of sovereignty of Syria? I will ask for the comments from our experts. I have not seen this news yet. I'll come back to you with the comment. Thank you. РИА Новости. Kristina Rodriguez, we have two questions. First question, if you can comment on what came out in Azeri and Armenian media, some opinions on the end of Karabakh war of 2020, and they are commenting on the role of Russia in that. How can you comment? I'd like to draw your attention to the fact that we also published something on the 7th of November on the website of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Russian Federation. We have on the anniversary of the signing of complete cessation of any military activity between Azerbaijan and Armenia. We have provided full extent of information on our role. The position of our country is open and we were consistent. And we always comment on this. Our efforts were aimed at achieving stable peace in the region, and it is through personal efforts of President of Russia, Vladimir Putin, it was possible to stop bloodshed in 2020 and 2023, and it is obvious that bilateral agreements remain as the roadmap, and also Russia has assisted the countries in achieving the peace. Another question. Recently, we see the destructive role of the West in Southern Caucasus, in Georgia and Armenia. Both countries. European Union is showing Moldova as an example to these countries. How can you comment on this? I think that Moldova and Ukraine, the situation that's been developing in these countries, you can use this as an example only to those who you hate. The destructive policy of the West, especially EU on Caucasus, is gaining momentum. And look at what they're doing with Georgia under the slogans. They are claiming that they're protecting democracy. They want to drag Georgia into this dangerous game. The actions of EU going in this context of fighting against Russia, and they are talking about sanctions and even blackmailing the whole nation. Georgia is an example. So they are twisting their hands. They want to punish them for their attempts to protect their sovereignty, not for their coalition, not for somebody's support, just for the fact that within their own country, people of that country decided to live according to their own laws. They want to use this to scare others.
ЕСовцев лишь тогда, когда его итоги помогают сделать из страны пешку в большой игре.
So EU is only using these countries as a pawn in their efforts, and they are providing financing to these forces. On the 13th of November, there was a copy of the letter of a high-ranking European official with an anti-government statement, who was allegedly fighting for the interests of the country. And 10 minutes after this, one of the opposition leaders read this letter in Georgian language. And that's a question about puppeteers. That's why the law on foreign agents or foreign participation, it angers them very much because it highlights their participation. And that allows us to create an important conclusion. So the more the country gives in to the interests of the West, the more their appetites grow. So they're trying to manipulate public opinion, they're trying to cultivate Russophobia in the country. Now they have deployed observation mission, but in fact it's a reconnaissance mission in Armenia. And it's the formula that is offered to the countries of the Caucasus is a paradox. So they are saying, look, you have to use Ukraine and Moldova as examples of Euro integration. What can you use as an example? The destruction of economy of Ukraine and suicide of the social and political life, their independence, their sovereignty. What can you use it as an example? Is how Moldovan citizens are being renamed Romanian citizens. Is this what you used to use as an example? So they want to see vassals who are ready to pass on their interests or pass on or transfer interests to their rulers. We see that the coup in Ukraine pushed Ukraine to the abyss. This Euro integration that was imposed on Ukraine has led to this civil conflict. And instead of the European Ukraine, you've got a totalitarian, destroyed state, which is governed by terrorists. It's a terrorist regime. In Moldova, they stated in their constitution irreversible nature of European integration, and that has started the process of enslaving of the country. So it's clear what all of the efforts of all these non-government organizations in Moldova result in. They will destroy Moldova from within. They're not going to create any industrial state or industrial strength or economic development. As a result, the republic is turning into the supply chain for criminal Ukrainian regime. And there are specific data, there's specific figures. We see that the actions of European Union are drawing Moldova into the crisis. So the European Union will provide up to a third of the budget of Moldova, but they cannot exist on donations because otherwise they turn into some appendage of the European Union. Whatever it is, but this is not an independent unit, independent country. And we've got growing concerns of the local citizens. They do not want to go along this path because this is a path of destruction. Thank you. Balt News. Thank you for this opportunity to ask you a question. In Lithuania, there are 44 centers of cyber security, and in Tallinn there is also a center for ensuring cyber security, and they are destroying the last vestiges of information presence in this country. This center is located in Tallinn, and it's the center for best practices in cybersecurity, and this is a NATO center. Over the last 10 years, they've become the testing ground for offensive operations in the digital sphere. Don't think it's a secret that this is an anti-Russian structure. It's the main characteristic, and they are deploying this flexible defense, but in fact these are offensive actions, so they're trialing these approaches. So lock shields, for example, they're imitating computer attacks to harm the infrastructure of our country. And it is interesting that they connected Ukraine to this. Hackers and intelligence officers are undergoing training of cyber attacks, and it is obvious that NATO countries are involved in the computer attacks against cyber attacks against our country, and this would not have been possible without the Western curators. There's no doubt. Thank you. Известия. Good afternoon, Maria. I've got two questions for you. New Prime Minister of Japan started confrontation with Russia from the first days of her rule, and the same was against China, and on the basis of this, Russia has banned 30 Japanese citizens from entering the country. How will it affect our relationships? We only respond to their measures. So these are countermeasures, counter steps. So some Japanese diplomats were included in these lists. However, they are not surprised that Russian diplomats are in the banned lists in Japan. So despite the so there are a few very sensible voices in Japan are still saying that it is it's self-destructive for Japan not to cooperate with Russia, and there's an anti-Russian line that they are following now. And there are no serious steps to defrost the relationships between the two countries from the side of government of Japan. When Ukrainian government is talking about cleaning up the system, but they are talking about actually what comes out is the scandals, corruption scandals. This is not the first scandal. This is not just theft. This is just a global misappropriation of billions of dollars and use of weapons and selling weapons on the black market. This is another story that has led to political collapse in Ukraine. And not only that, the waves of this political crisis also reaches countries that were supplying Kiev regime without any checks, any audits, weapons and money. And of course, we did not have any doubts before that Kiev regime has mastered the art of appropriating the huge volumes of finance and weapons. So this is a conglomerate of corruption and bribery. And they had those problems before, but now it has taken unbelievable scale. This is an international mafia structure, mafia-type structure, where representatives of Kiev government are participating. This is something that is merged with the state machinery in Ukraine. It's not just separate persons who just stole here and there. This is a systematic engine that is incorporated into the state governance in Ukraine, and key players are participating in this. Mindich has been, one of the authors of this scheme of embezzling hundreds of millions of dollars that were aimed at war with Russia, and they were just stealing it away. And now we can see that I believe that the citizens of these countries, of these Western countries, should ask their governments, first, why are they sponsoring Kiev regime? And second, what are the guarantees that this money would not be stolen? And third is, where is the audit? Where is the control systems? And the fourth is all of this as a terrorist component, because the regime of Zelensky is conducting terrorist operations against civil population. Sinhua. Sinhua. Recently, the Prime Minister of Japan stated that there might be some possibility of military intervention. And despite the protests from China, they're not refusing to withdraw their statement. And this goes against the norms of international relationships. And this undermines the spirit of the four China-Japan agreements. You mentioned that Japan has not yet recognized its mistake I beg your pardon, they have not recognized the results of the Second World War. It's been 80 years, and they're still not recognizing the results of the Second World War. In different formats we are celebrating the anniversary of the 80th anniversary of Nuremberg trial. And on the basis of this Nuremberg trial, there are certain elements that have been the cornerstones of international law. And Japan, 80 years later, they are not just not celebrating it, they are not conducting any educational events or measures, they are not even recognizing any of that. And then they are not even recognizing the results of the tribunals that took place in Far East. They are not recognizing the results of the Second World War, not even latest mistakes. Just count back this 80 years and then count 80 years from now and then see if they recognize it or not. Near Taiwan, the possibility of military intervention has been discussed, and they are substituting the facts and altering the facts. And you can see that a number of countries that support the position of single China, unified China, but then at the same time they are supporting Taiwan with weapons, and they are supporting separatist movements and moods in Taiwan as a means of containment of China. So the number of methods is very simple. It is very similar to the methods that are used by these parties in Ukraine. And Russian Federation has recorded its position on this matter. They believe that Taiwan is an integral part of China, and Russia is against any independence of Taiwan. And we see that China has got all the basis to protect its territorial integrity. And Russia, as a true friend and a partner of Beijing, will continue to support China on the matter of Taiwan and territorial integrity. Thank you very much. Thank you. Reuters. Good evening. And if you can comment on the recent statement of the Chancellor of Germany, Merz, where at Deutsche Zeitung conference, he said that the world order has come to an end, and they said that his Ministry of Internal Foreign Affairs, Foreign Ministries, do you agree with the statement that on the whether we agree or disagree? I would not say that. I would not be saying it, because what does he mean when he says that the world order has come to an end? If he talks about UN-centric model has come to an end with all these documents and agreements, if this is what he means, we should say that they have done everything possible to destroy that. If he talks about the ordinary way of things, if he feels that this tradition of separating people of the world into groups of, those who can rule and those who have to submit to the rule, then it's a different matter. Then I would not be analyze or argue with him. I think that you need to specify what he means. But with this, we have our own opinion that the world order that Western countries are used to is rules-based order. In other words, they're imposing rules and standards and norms where all participants are not provided with equal status or equal role. And this is the way that Germany is relating to other countries. So this world order is based on the rule of the strongest. He who is strongest is right, and all the consequences that flow out of this. And so this world order that is presented by the West is coming to an end. This world order is doomed, and Russia has been saying about this for a long time. The system, this concept of European safety has failed its mission. If we take example of Ukraine, the West has started unprovoked hybrid aggression against Russia. So this operation had been in preparation a long time. So this system has just collapsed. So the system of security that they are trying to create, it without Russia. But in actual fact, they are trying to create it against Russia. As a central part of this system, they are proposing a deeply hostile bloc of NATO, because this was the initial goal of that bloc, and Merz talks about it. They are now forcing militarization of Europe, and now we can see these very strong statements. They talk about big war with Russia. Heads of European states are trying to turn the whole of Eurasia into military confrontation field. They are trying to encircle that area. And in these conditions, as a strategic cornerstone, we feel that we have put forward the initiative of cooperation within Eurasia. This pan-Eurasian approach provides for equal participation and honest balance of needs of the participants. Multipolarity of participants. As you know, that Sergei Lavrov, Foreign Minister of Russia, spoke about this on the 28th of October. He spoke about this in Belarus, and we'll publish it on our website. And there's other material on the topic. They're grouped together on the website, if you look there. But if we take a broader perspective, Russia has a clear understanding of the future, and there is a framework for forming multipolar world order, and we have already stated these key principles, and I'll repeat them again. Sovereign equality of states, non-interference into the internal affairs, cultural and civilizational multipolarity in the world. Thank you. Thank you. News.ru. News.ru. We have two questions. First question. Trump supported the initiative to impose sanctions on trade partners of Moscow. How is Russia going to react if this comes about? We said many times that we comment on the facts only. The rhetoric can change, and especially now in the United States. But we have a basic approach to this. We talk about the damaging nature of all the sanctions that are illegitimate sanctions that are imposed on different countries, and that becomes more and more obvious. However, that does not bring sobriety yet to in the heads of those who are hostile to us. In U.S. administration, there are many people who still believe in delayed efficacy of these sanctions. There's a number of people who still vote for strengthening anti-Russian regime, and they're not happy with the fact that their hegemonial attempts are countered and are unsuccessful. So it's difficult for them to accept that we can live under the sanctions and still develop and still go on. But refusal to accept reality plays a joke on them. So they still want to rely on their false dominance that they believed in for so long. A growing number of international players understands this too, and their desire to use different models of interaction strengthens. Some countries, some political leaders, and some journalists. Some journalists react very in pain when they hear this calls not to buy things from Russia. When you go to a shop and you try to buy something, and then you know that a supplier provides something and you're happy with what they supply, and somebody is shouting from a loudspeaker, "Do not buy this." Even if you take it to the checkout, we will force you not to buy this product from the shop, and we'll sell you another product, but at a higher price. I think that even George Orwell would not have thought of this. He talked about total control, but he did not talk about the system of total idiocy, which is being implemented under the guise of scientific progress and democracy. Orwell, this dictatorship system or totalitarian system, was Orwell represented it as a system that did not try to pass as something else. So they were not trying to hide in Orwell's work people who were promoting totalitarian nature. They were not trying to hide its true nature, but here they are trying to disguise it. As a result, the American dictatorship robs other countries of their choice, and they try to prevent the proliferation of systems that are alternative to the dollar, alternative to their logistical systems. And they are talking about the fact that these alternative systems, alternative to the dollar, they undermine the stability. However, they are themselves banning these countries from using dollar. So this is violation of international law, and our country is a large exporter of goods and food, and it's difficult how participants will behave as a reaction to these additional sanctions or additional tariffs. And we will continue mutually beneficial economic cooperation with all these countries, which support our own interests, and we're not going to react to attempts to threaten us. France did not invite our representatives to the celebration of the Second World War, victory in Second World War. Do you think Russian Federation can participate when we are invited ultimately? Yes, I can confirm that France did not invite representatives of Russia on the 11th of November. From 2022, none of our diplomatic representatives have been invited to the Second World War events, and we see that this is another attempt by the Western politicians to forget the feat of the Russian soldiers, to whom all of these countries owe their freedom. This is beneath a country that respects itself, beneath a country that claims to be a world power, that is a permanent member of Security Council. We could say that France, it's quite possible France would not have existed if there wasn't support from the Soviet Union in the Second World War. And we talked about Nuremberg trial events. There was a son of one of the people who was a journalist who was covering this event. Gapolov was there, and he talked about how his father, as a witness to all of these events in Nuremberg, said that French delegation did not participate much in those events, but in fact it was just dragged into it. They were not initiators, they did not produce any results, but this delegation and France was given a chance to take place on the bench of those who were victors in that war, those who were in Nuremberg and with their heads held high, and not the ones who were guilty. In Eastern Prussia, we can see that efforts of the Russian army saved Paris, and we can see that the country officially capitulated to the Third Reich. They have accepted and let the German military through to the east. When they are part of the Security Council, what are they doing in that seat? Well, you can see yourself. Our position is, irrespective of how deep the current crisis is, our common duty is to respect the memory of everyone who died protecting the freedom of our countries. But with each anniversary of the First World War, near the memorial of the first battalion who fought, representatives of Russian, of French public, and representatives of French cultural circles. They come together in order to celebrate and honor the memory of the soldiers who died helping the French army. Thank you very much for your response. Chinese Media Corporation. Maria, good afternoon. Maria, I've got two questions. The first question, despite the fact that we covered a little bit the intervention of Japan in China, that behavior of Japan, taking into account the fact that they will be buying Tomahawk rockets, this new militarism, do you think that this could damage Japan itself and also Asia Pacific? See, we are following closely defense actions of Japan, and it is clear that that country is now on the path of expedited militarization, and their military expenditure is going up, and they are buying American weapons. They've got aggressive rhetoric. They refuse to recognize historic facts. They do not show any remorse for what their ancestors done 80 years ago and even earlier. We regularly responded to all of this, responded to your question, and based on our comments, Sanaa Takaitis decided to create an integrated intelligence structure which will fight against intelligence activities of foreign states. As surprising as it may seem, but this is copying exactly the structure that was created in 1940 in Japan, where the Second World War was gaining momentum. And what was the result of the policy of those years? And it's quite clear. In order to avoid what happened in 1945, they have to learn the lessons, and they have to deal with this in their own constitution. And second question, since 2022, Indonesia, India, and Brazil, they were presidents of G20, and South Africa will be president of G20. Do you think that in the last few years, Global South, their voice became stronger? And what is their Russian position on the Global South and these platforms? And how is Russia going to cooperate with Global South in order to form multiple world? We talked about the fact that there's a growing concern that there will be fragmentation in the world trade. There will be trade limitations, sanction wars. With this background, Russia and China are jointly trying to counteract these measures. Shoulder to shoulder, we stand against this, and our steps, our mutual support, our work together with Global South and the global trade, Russia and Beijing are strengthening these formats, G20 and SOC, and so on. And we are supporting the creation of the multiple world and inclusive integration. cooperation within G20. Our countries are working together in order to counteract global economic challenges and working towards a just and balanced social and economic development. And in this context, we believe that South Africa's presidency is very important in this, and BRICS countries are also, and we support the efforts of our South African friends, coordination of activity between us and China and Beijing and South Africa, also within the framework of different organizations, TESS, for example, where China will be chairman, and we will be working together in order to create South Pacific and South Asian cooperation. Vestnik Kavkaza is with us. We have a question. 3+3 conference that is being planned. How is Russia participating in it? And how is Russia, what is Russia taking, what efforts are they taking to make this a permanent platform? We mentioned this in the context of Istanbul meeting in October 24. This was in the Interregional Cooperation Group, and the next meeting will take place in Baku or Yerevan, and we hope that Baku and Yerevan will determine the participation of their ministers on the basis of this package, who is going to take on this role this year and next year. We will support mutual decision, and we see that many times there were meetings in Washington and Abu Dhabi, and as for our vision of 3+3 format, Azerbaijan, Armenia, Turkey, Iran, Russia, there are 3 meetings that have been done. The main focus is on consistent changes and implementation of different measures in transportation and infrastructure. All of these measures will support stability and thriving of the whole region. Thank you. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. One question. Representative of US in NATO, Whitaker, on the 18th of November in Bloomberg, called on Europe to move to a new level of activity against Russia and take the frozen assets in order to ensure financing of Ukraine over the next few years. How would you comment on this anti-Russian measure? This Whitaker, I think that this is some kind of attempt to copy Biden. You remember, you said now that he called upon Europe to move to a new level of aggression against Russia. This is what Biden was doing. I don't know what party Whitaker belongs to, but I think it's a good question for the President of the US to clarify who is following which course of actions. The new administration is trying to destroy the legacy of Biden. Even they removed the picture of Biden from the White House. But it looks like Biden has got somebody who is continuing his line, because Biden always wanted the European Union to adopt anti-Russian sanctions. I think that any statements of Whitaker on this are just out of place. It's this narrative that they're promoting, and there's simply no competence, there's no mandate for that representative to do anything with assets of the Russian Federation, frozen assets. And we see that they are speculating on this, they are interpreting United Nations statutes and other international norms. They are ignoring all these laws that relate to the assets, foreign assets, and they are pushing other Western partners, especially Europeans, so that they would start an illegitimate, from any point of view, this is an illegitimate chain of events that would be the seizure of Russian assets. So they want to place all the bad consequences on these, on the people who will move forward with this. At the same time, they're trying to minimize the consequences of these actions. They are not even talking about destabilizing effect. The effect will be obviously destabilizing for the dollar system. It's obvious that this another attempt of the Western Ukrainians, Western bureaucrats, they're trying to use these Russian assets to finance Ukraine. Of course, they're interested in something else. First of all, they wanted to freeze or to take out the income from this interest from these reserves, and now they're discussing taking the actual reserves, frozen reserves. That means that they ran out of the money to finance Zelensky regime, and they're not able to borrow any money. And we see that even within European Union, not everyone is prepared to commit this crime. They're afraid of the risks, and this will be crushing risks. And if they confiscate Russian reserves, they will have to respond, and this would be the hardest blow against European Union and its members. Europe is quickly losing its competitive advantage. And if they do this, then this will Europe will no longer be considered to be a safe haven for any funds or any investment, and they will lose any trust. So these actions, using any legal system, would be an open dishonesty. This will be theft, and anyone who is calling to commit these steps, anyone who is listening to these people has to weigh their own risks, and these actions will be punishable. Thank you very much. Liverek. Good afternoon.
Комиссия по регулированию общественных услуг в Армении лишила компанию электрических сетей Армении лицензий, несмотря на решение.
Commission on Regulating Public Services revoked the license from the energy company in Armenia, despite the decision of European regulator. Yes, we are looking at the situation with Mr. Karapetyan and power networks in Armenia. protection of Russian assets abroad is one of the priorities. Moscow and Yerevan have got a channel to discuss these questions. And I would like to emphasize that over the last 20 years, electric power networks of Armenia was the key player in economy of Armenia. It was providing tax revenue and employment to 200,000 people. And Mr. Karapetyan, who became the head of Karapetyan, using his own funds on parity with government of Armenia, covered the gap between the new tariffs and the old tariffs for the small business and residents. And we see that the company spent over almost $700 million was spent by the company on upgrading the infrastructure, 680 million to be precise. From 2024 to 2034, $795 million of investment was planned, and we are hoping that managers that are appointed by the government of Armenia will be able to provide a more effective model for managing, but we'll have to judge on the actual steps, on the actual actions. Lenta, are you? I have one question. General Kukula stated that an unnamed enemy is planning to attack Poland. How can we comment on that statement, and who is that mystery enemy? They are saying they can feel that the enemy is coming, but that enemy is unnamed. It's like they have to looking into what Polish elites are doing. They are frightening their own population. They're creating threats that do not exist. If they are threatening them with Russia, we have to then emphasize that it is Warsaw that is breaking the relationships with Russia. Now they are closing diplomatic representation in Poland. Was it initiated by Russia? No. And who is supplying equipment and weapons to Kiev regime? And who was participating in anti-constitutional coups? This was Poland. So where are the actions of Russia, which you can classify as a threat, of that unnamed? Where is the single action? They can't provide anything if they are acting on somebody else's order, if they are fulfilling the wishes of other countries, or maybe they are fulfilling their own political ambitions for which they are rewarded, then they have to state this directly. They should not be using all these hybrid formulas and statements. Thank you. Also, I would like to add that if we talk about real enemies of Poland, there are real enemies of Poland. Real enemies of Poland are the ones who are trying to create animosity between Poland and other countries. Real enemies are those who are trying to create the belt of instability around the country. Real enemies of Poland are those who do not allow Poland to use resources of countries nearby, to trade with those countries, to create cooperation, to create logistical cooperation. This is what is acting against the interest of Polish people. Those who do not want to create an indivisible security in Europe. They want to constantly set Western Europe against Central Europe, against Eastern Europe or western part of Eurasia, so that Eurasia cannot be unified. So these are real enemies of Poland and Polish people, and you should look for them in Warsaw and in your own society and around it. And I called them up. With a difference to Kukula, I actually am naming the enemies of Poland. Thank you. Voice of Fatherland, please. Anastasia Abramova. We have two questions. First, European Commission started to create a new body, intelligence body, which will be under direct control of von der Leyen. And the objective is security of European Union. And so there's existing intelligence center is concerned that there's a duplicating of functions. So that tendency emphasizes the fact that EU is turning from a political bloc into a military bloc. Is this a real defense of Europe, or is it just turning it into a branch of NATO? Now, of course, this is not. We see that Western Europe has lost its sovereignty in political, in financial, in military, in terms of humanitarian development. Recently, European Union was associated with economic programs. This was done for the benefit of their people. So they were working on objectives that EU and that European community, this is why it was created. And today we see that EU is now focused exclusively on political questions and political issues and aggressive ways of promoting these issues and turning EU institutions into military blocs. And the conversation about the intelligence bodies is just a part of this process that destroys EU economy. So this massive debt that they're raising in order to finance military interests will be a heavy burden on EU. And in order to justify this huge military expense, they are trying to use these threats of Russia, which are completely baseless. And this has become part of their scenario that they invented themselves. And this became a phobia, an idea, and maybe they have to just directly recognize that this is what they want, and they have to say that this is an inevitable future that does not depend on them. But this is false, and this is self-delusion. Military rhetoric and manipulating people with their fear is used by European politicians and European elites in order to distract people from economic and social problems, turn away their attention from limiting the freedoms of people and freedom of speech, and just to preserve their power. Another question: how do you evaluate Russian-Greek relationships? Prime Minister of Greece and Zelensky discussed cooperation in defense, and they talked about development and deployment of Navy drones, marine drones. This is another stage. There were problems before, but another stage was initiated in 2022, which was initiated by Greece, and they are taking unfriendly steps. I'll give you some examples. Athens were the first ones to send weapons to Ukraine, which are daily used against citizens of eastern Ukraine, Donbass, Crimea, and this is despite the fact that Greeks live in these areas, and these Greeks love their historic motherland and they love their country, and throughout the years they have been establishing contacts and connections, and they've never been part in any of these games of inciting violence or confrontations. But Greek government did not think about these people, did not think about their own citizens who have relatives there. And because of these problems, now they have issues. And we see that on the 17th of November, they signed an agreement on cooperation. And this step, as any other step of the West, aimed at defeating Russia on the battlefield. But in fact, it's just a fight until the last Ukrainian. Russia will react to this too. Yes, thank you very much. Rudav?
Yes, I am with you. Thanks a lot for giving me the opportunity. I have 3 questions. My first one is that on Monday, Russian foreign minister and his Iranian counterpart held a phone call. Part of their discussion was Iranian nuclear program and the negotiations related to that. As Russia, how do you support Iran to enter the negotiations again with International Atomic Energy Agency and with certain countries? How could you ensure that they will not be attacked while being in the negotiations?
Russia is actively trying to find solutions around Iranian nuclear program. We have spoken against military attacks or strikes against any nuclear facilities are unacceptable, and in the US and their allies talked about preventative strikes against Iran. This has led to a deep crisis, and these strikes have undermined the basis for the peaceful nuclear program that Iran has always followed. As for the position of the Iranian side, who are trying to, against all the attempts to create havoc and destroy the peaceful process, Iranian position has always been that it's better to negotiate and ensure satisfaction of mutual needs. Iran needs firm guarantees that their facilities would not be subjected to bombing and rocket strikes. And they are not asking for anything extraordinary. And within classical diplomacy, this would be a sufficient basis to build relationships on. If our US partners were happy to proceed on that basis. The Western partners should refuse to use the threats and blackmail, and parties should work on the basis of international law and recognize the legitimate right of peaceful enrichment of uranium.
My second question is that some of Russian oil companies has been sanctioned by the US and other Western countries. How do you ensure that these sanctions will have no effect on the oil and gas production by those companies in Iraq?
This is within the competency of all economic operators themselves. I think we can connect you with them. But I would like to point your attention that yesterday, on the 19th of November, representative of the Russian government, Alexander Novak, commented on this. He said that American sanctions did not affect production of oil in Russia. There's no change in the overall production of oil, and there are no corrections to that figure now. There's another statement. Novak stated that Russia is not going to voluntarily reduce production of oil, as was announced in 2023 after the sanctions, in accordance with the agreement of OPEC+.
My last question is that President Vladimir Putin awarded Mr. Rashad Milan a medal, and you have been talking about your relations with KRG in Iraq and other Kurdish parties and forces. How do you see the role of Kurdish people in Russia? In which fields do you think they might have the most impact? Also, how will you try to improve your relations with Kurdish parties and authorities in the Middle East?
On the 4th of November, as you know, as part of traditional award ceremony, President Putin awarded a well-known Rashid Miranov the Medal of Pushkin, and this was done for the significant input in strengthening the interest to Russian culture and literature. And so this was, as for Russian Kurds, Russia is a multinational state. There are over 190 ethnic groups, and there are about 50,000 Kurds is the community, and we support our relationships with them. If we talk about other states, other countries where Kurdish populations, for us, this is Russian citizens, and they have all the opportunity to keep their tradition and their culture, and they're proud of their culture. And the Russian law and politics of our country, policy of our country promotes that. And I have many people who I know personally who are Kurds, and they live in our country, and they
Have a nice day.
Thank you very much. After E. You've answered one of our questions. This is about the Rafale jets supply from France to Ukraine, and with the background of the failure of Mi-6 operation, where they were trying to steal a MiG-32. in terms of London behavior, they're still keeping silent. What is their reaction? In this case, talking about actions of France, I would like to maybe use a English expression. Their actions on supply of hundreds of Rafale fighter jets to Ukraine. This is just monkey business, to use an English expression. This is just emptiness, empty words. We have it's just a pantomime, just a play. I think they maybe earn something on this. If this manipulation brings some money, but then the question is, what money and to whom? And for European safety, how dangerous are these supplies for European safety? The thing is that whatever people say, whatever is going to threaten our security, whatever is going to be supplied to Ukraine, all of that is going to be destroyed. And Rafale will also be legitimate targets. And we made that position clear. And they saw this using example of their tanks. They saw this using examples of their drones and other types of weapons that they supply. Now, in terms of supplying Ukraine with weapons, which Paris say is going to strengthen their position and bring peace closer, they say. There is a cartoon where a wolf is hugging a wolf is hugging a goat and is saying, look, oh, you are so cold, I'm going to make you warm, I'm going to eat you in order to make you warm. So British are constantly derailing peace negotiations, and on the other hand, they are supplying weapons to them, and they understand that these weapons are killing Ukrainian citizens. We understand that this is just a made-up story in order to explain something to their own citizens. Those who follow this logic, either they do not understand the genesis of Ukrainian conflict or the goals of the Russian Federation in this conflict. They are So they've got their own goals to make profit out of this, and we've got even books published in the West, different books published every month in Italy, in Chile, in other countries. So bringing Ukraine into NATO, militarization of Ukraine is creating fundamental threats for Russian Federation, to which Russia cannot respond using all their means. We see that the steps like the steps of France to supply jets to Ukraine, decision to supply jets. We know that Paris is doing it on purpose. They are destabilizing the situation. Their plans are not unexpected to us. We see that France is one of the key engines of this conflict, and we see that France keeps threatening or scaring their own population into supporting Ukraine, and they are one of the key members of coalition of the willing. And Catherine Vatren, who is the head of defense and the head of foreign intelligence, Nicolas Lerner. They are talking about military preparation of France. They are conducting specialized military drills. They are making statements that all of this is being done as defense. This is not convincing, taking into account that they never hid the fact that they wanted to strategically defeat Russia. What kind of defense is this if they're trying to attack first? There's another question about London. Yes, we did not get any reaction from the British government, from any of their bodies. We have not received anything in response to the statement of 11th of November on the massive preparation of the massive provocation with the participation of Ukrainian counterparts. This is quite convenient. They are traditionally abstaining from any comments that are uncomfortable to them. So no Bloomberg, no BBC requests. They are not interested in this. Why? Because this is an obvious failure of British intelligence. Also, it goes against their interest to comment on their harmful activity, where they are pushing their partner to a new global conflict. The objective of the operation was to identify the level of flexibility of the partners, whether they would be willing to follow the instructions. So this is participation in some extremist activity. So London, who is sacrificing Ukrainian people and Ukrainian state in order to pursue their own interests, with the same gentleman attitude, they will sacrifice them when this will become convenient for British strategists. Europe should understand this. They should remember what was there before. They should stop believing this, believing the myth of the British, of some dangerous Russians, that threat to stability in Europe is coming from these politicians' offices in Britain. Thank you very much. If you haven't got any questions, we spent maybe about 3 hours with you. I'd like to say goodbye to everyone and look forward to seeing you next time.